Whether you're on a mountaintop or a shoreline, so much of Alaska is connected by these little threads of travel, and almost nowhere exemplifies that more than a little town called Whittier, Alaska. Breaking feedback. Welcome to Whittier, Alaska, or at least the way into Whittier, Alaska. Technically, Whittier is somewhere over here, and we're actually going to paint Whittier and a big long panorama, but right now we're kind of looking at the way in, Passage Canal. We've got a little outline here, all my supplies, my watercolors, my water, a little bit of watercolor paper, and I traced this in a bit of waterproof pen, but I have a little tiny boat right there. You could replace that with anything you want. You could add a ferry, you could add some military craft, you could add a canoe. Lots and lots and lots and lots of people and boats have been through this way, which is part of why Whittier is one of these gateways to the Kenai Mountains-Turnagain National Heritage Area. But before we get too much into the weeds, let's just start painting and let us paint a rare sunny day in Whittier. I mean, maybe not too rare. They happen, but whenever it does happen, it feels pretty special. I'm gonna start with a little bit of some light sky blue. I've got the colors I'm using, but really anything you got is gonna work fine. When it comes to painting in Alaska in the field, it's so much less about getting the exact colors and more about just putting a single mark on a sheet of paper. That's the hard part. And so in this case, we're gonna kind of follow those rules. So I've kind of mixed up a little bit of blue, nice sky blue. And I'm gonna start with this upper edge. I put a bit of a border around my painting just because I like the way that looks, but you can do it however you want. It is just sort of nice though when you get this nice little matte, kind of a quick way to make things fancy. But that is one of the only lines I'm gonna worry about right now at this point in the painting. You can see I kind of put just a little bit of just sort of this loose outline right there, making sure to stick on the outer edge, and then I'll just get some water right here on my brush, clean water, and I'll just touch it right to that outline I already made, and you'll see it'll just start to flow its way naturally down. So I basically put half blue, half water, let the two touch, and then they'll square themselves away. This is kind of the fun part of this stage. We're gonna be pretty loose, pretty open, and then as things dry, we'll get more and more kind of precise. When it comes to down here, all of this water, depends on kind of what sort of a day. We got Passage Canal, which kind of works its way all the way up until we eventually get to the Gulf of Alaska, way, way, way back here. And so we could have sort of a choppy, rough day, or we could have one of those real glassy, sort of perfect, calm days. If you want to talk about something really rare, I think we do something like that. So we're gonna basically make the reflection down here. So it means we're gonna put some blue, and then we're gonna kind of touch in those other colors and let them flow in. Pretty complex stuff for our first painting, but I'm up for it. If you're up for it, let's give it a go. Worst case scenario, you just paint it in something darker. Pretty easy risks. So what this is gonna look like is basically the exact same as the sky, just a mirror, a little bit of that blue. We're just gonna add a touch down here, just like that. I love this blue. This is a cerulean blue is what I'm using, and it's like one of the most common colors I use in Alaska, because whether it's sort of that Alaskan pale blue sky or glaciers or sort of glacier silt or whatever it is, it seems like there's a whole lot of it. Forget-me-nots, Alaska's state flower, it is kind of covered in this color of blue in Alaska. The icy color of snow. Whatever blue you got is totally fine. So we got a touch more of our water here. We're gonna do the exact same thing we did to that sky. Just adding a little bit of water to that blue we already put down. Working it up just like this. We're gonna make sure we get all the way over, and it's okay to really let it get a tiny bit messy here. It's okay to break those lines. We're gonna color it up with something much darker here in a moment. That's looking really, really great. So these are gonna be what we paint next. And there is a whole bunch of different ways that we can kind of sketch out these mountains, but however we decide to sketch it out is going to be what we put for our reflection. So we're a little bit trapped here in that we actually need to know what we're painting. So when it comes to reflections, this right here is gonna be kind of some lovely dark green. Up here, maybe we have some of these kind of nice almost spring or sort of midsummer, where we've got a little bit of blue and a little bit of sort of that snow in there. But mostly we're going to be looking for a touch of green, probably right down here. So let's just grab a little bit of this right here. I'm also stalling a little bit because I don't want it to be too flowy. I want it like this perfect texture. It's also worth doing kind of the risky paint moves right at the beginning, because if you mess up, you can always just work it back in. Or just keep on going. You might be surprised what you learn when, you feel like you've already ruined your painting. All of a sudden you can kind of open up and free up. Here we go. So this is a little bit of green we got right here, and I'm just gonna kind of touch it to this edge, not quite over the edge, but just let it do its thing. Kind of see it's already sort of that lovely watercolor flowy feel going on. And this is like a glass ocean sort of a day. No wind, little chop, nice harbor, just working our way down. So rare, but one of those perfect days. If you wanted, you could also kind of paint in some storms. It's a little bit more accurate. Some, maybe a gray day, some nice dark blues, whatever you're feeling right now, whatever you kind of need. And then same right down here, we're gonna add just a little bit of maybe some blue. Get a nice dark kind of royalish blue here. I think it's ultramarine. It's appropriate to use the blue called marine in this marine environment. So we're just gonna add just a touch right over to kind of these edges. As soon as that's ready, you're kind of gauging the wetness perfectly. There we go, something like that here. Just a touch right there. You can kind of see it'll sort of go all over the place. And we do it at this point now because we want to be kind of messy, and then everything will get a lot more kind of tight once we work a little bit further down the painting. There we go. Something kind of like that. And then maybe a touch of water or something, just to kind of get it a bit more diffused. Perfect. Okay. If that's looking good, then you kind of let that dry. It's really easy to overwork things at this point, so don't feel the need to kind of get it perfect. This is just a reflection on an ocean. It's these mountains that are going to be the real kind of kicker. All right. So using a finger, perhaps, you kind of feel and see if stuff is still wet up there. If it is, that's totally fine. We just kind of want to get a gauge, because if we put, any mountain like this and it was still as wet as this part, it would just float right up. So there's a few things you can do. You can either wait, you could use like a blow dryer or something like that, or you could use this, the most handy of watercolor tools, a little piece of paper towel. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch the edges. I'm not trying to make any clouds or lift any paint really, but I'm just kind of triple checking that it is in fact dry. If you're in a much drier climate than I am here in Alaska, then chances are you are already good and it's already dry. Or maybe you're in an even more humid climate than I am here in Alaska, and it's going to take a little bit longer. But once you have something like that, just to make sure that it is dry on those edges, we're going to kind of work on these mountains, which are going to be sort of speckled with snow a little bit, and then they're going to slowly kind of work their way down. So not all snow is like perfectly pure white kind of all the way to the edge. So we're actually going to take probably a little bit of that cerulean we already added, and we're going to kind of place where most of that snow is going to be, sort of freehanding it here. You can kind of just put some loose edges, something like that. Just imagine these sort of snowpacks that are still there even though it's spring or summer, because there is so much snow in this area. It is almost unfathomable how much snow falls in a given year, just on the coast, but then on these peaks as well, where it really kind of comes down. So you got something kind of like that. It's pretty loose, it's pretty uneven, but that's totally fine. That's sort of what we're going for. We could wait until this dries, but because this mountain is so far off, we're gonna kind of go for that nice uneven look as well, or almost where it blends as well. So I'm gonna grab a little bit more of that blue that we were using, stick in some pretty basic colors at this point, and I'm gonna be adding just a little bit of this, slightly lower, kind of touching in on those bases. And now we just have a few areas that are pure white. because it's really only where it catches the light that you got those pure white areas in watercolor. Something like that. That's looking lovely. And then maybe just a little bit of water to kind of round that off. Just sort of pulling it through the edges. These layers of mountains up here are going to be much darker, so any kind of rough edges are going to disappear in the mountains. You can kind of come back there too with a little bit more blue if you need some of those edges of the mountains. Maybe those tops need a little bit more, something like this. Real easy to overthink it, but don't worry too much about this stage. These kind of back mountains are not really the main focus. It's these front ones that count. Voila. Something nice, simple, a little bit easy, just like that. And we're gonna kind of wait for a lot of that to dry. Now kind of coming back here, you can kind of see how with that wet on wet, that water's finally kind of doing its thing. It takes some time, so it's really all about patience. And that is looking so cool. I just love how that look is. And it's funny because we're the reflection first and then the mountain second, but now we can kind of use a lot of those same colors once the rest is dry to work kind of back through on a bunch of this. We're gonna add two little things. We're gonna add a little bit of the reflection here. Because this mountain is closer, it kind of gets that bigger reflection. These further away ones are gonna get a smaller one. So I'll just grab like a little bit of green, maybe a little bit of blue or something, and I'll just add a little bit of this right here. Just a line or something like that. Always come back in if you need, add a touch of water. You're just kind of playing right there. Voila, beautiful. And then we're gonna add this little section right here. If it's dry, always just test with a finger. And how mountains sort of work in Alaska and everywhere else, especially where it's kind of smoky, is the further away they are, kind of the lighter and the bluer they get. So that's about as light and as blue as it is. This is gonna be slightly less light and blue, and then this will be the slightly lessest light and blue until we get to this mountain. So I'm just gonna add maybe a bit more blue here, maybe even like a touch of purple or something. Just the subtleties. But something slightly darker than what I did right there because I'm not gonna cover up, you can see all those little lines and everything. I'm gonna clean that up because I'll just add this right in here like this. You'd never know that we were kind of messy on that way over. And then just rinse and add just a touch of water right down here. And I can be as messy as I want because this will be even darker. It's right there. Perfect. Just some of those really cool peaks. I love those kind of fjord-like alpine peaks. Now right down here, we're gonna add a little bit of our sort of foliage because we're gonna have this be lighter and this will kind of carve it out. So I'm actually gonna start with maybe even a little bit of yellow or something like that. This is how I love to do trees. Yellow and blue make green. You could just start with straight green, but there's something so cool about creating it on the paper. So I got a touch of yellow. I'm gonna kind of follow this line right here, working our way up, right in here, and adding just down the line. For an Alaskan spot, Whittier is surprisingly tropical in the vegetation, whether it's Devil's Club, just like reaching super high up, or any of these spots that just feel like a temperate rainforest. It's so cool to kind of paint in as bright and green as they feel. I feel like no photograph ever really captures that. Now I'm gonna add in some green just below, and you'll see it makes a wholly kind of different set of colors, which is just lovely. And then we'll round that all off with some nice dark blue, something like this. Right there, perfect. Well, that might be too much. It's all about moderation. Just a touch of blue right down here, scooting in, boom, 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 and there you have it. And we'll kind of let that do a lot of its own thing. Watercolor is all about kind of giving the paint some patience. Now, while that dries, there's actually some pretty wild stories around Whittier. I know this is just the way in, but this body of water has actually been massively significant to so much wider of an area than what it is right here. Alaska has a lot of coastline. I mean, like a shocking amount. In fact, if you added all of it together, Alaska has more coastline than all of the lower 48 states combined. Most of the sketches we're working on are in the Kenai Mountains-Turnagain Heritage Area, which is a transportation corridor on land. But the connection to the ocean, like everything in Alaska, plays an enormous role. We'll use Whittier and Passage Canal as an example, even though on the full-scale map, you could almost barely pick them out. The name on the map, Passage Canal, which leads to Whittier, came in 1794 from George Vancouver, although it had been called lots of other things from the people who had lived here for thousands of years before. Not only would the Chugach of Prince William Sound have found food and shelter and home through these waterways, but they also provided valuable trading routes, and Whittier was actually the portage to reach Turnagain Arm. Even though there's lots of bays and fjords, just getting over these mountains was really difficult, and one of the only places you could really pull it off was Portage Pass, which is more or less right above Whittier, and definitely right above the tunnel entrance, which now exists to make things a little bit simpler. But Whittier's actually become super important even more recently during World War II, and not because of how small the mountains are in that particular section, but actually because of how deep the water is right below. Whittier is actually one of the few deep water ports in Alaska, which is kind of key if you want to bring gigantic, very heavily laden ships into port very close. That's exactly what the military wanted to do during World War II. So Whittier was kind of created as a almost secret town as they looked into bringing things in and connecting the rest of Alaska via railroad. We'll get into more of all of these during the other watercolors, but it's just kind of cool to see just how connected it is. Even though you might be nowhere near the ocean, Alaska is held together by these crisscrossing threads of trails, connection, trades, migration, you name it. It's all just one giant picture. And as I mentioned earlier, when you have more coastline than the entire United States, or at least the lower 48 of the United States combined, that giant picture almost always seems to start with the ocean. And now back to our sketch with Passage Canal and this deep water port. We have most everything filled in aside from the two biggest parts of all of this. So let's work on this mountain right here. We're almost past that blue stage, so we're gonna mix up things that are just almost mostly blue. Maybe even get a tiny bit of green in there. Let's jump in with a touch of blue. We'll start with that at least, and then we'll kind of work our way into some greens in the middle. Here's how that'll look. A little brush full of blue. Just adding it right up to the top, hoping everything is dry. If it's not and it kind of mixes it together, that's okay too. And then going right down here to the edge. And then maybe I'll put a touch of blue or something down here as well. Then I'll add some green in the middle and let those two kind of play. Bit of green, maybe I'll even mix it with my blue right there. And then I'll add this green right in the middle, making sure that they do connect there, and you'll see they're already doing that thing. Look at that. That's what watercolor is made for. Perfect. Down here, we could branch out a bit. We could go brown if we want. We could go, purple. Kind of depends. I do love a little bit of purple. It's like this hidden color in Alaskan landscapes. It's kind of hard to see, but it's sort of like this underpinning of everything. At least that's how I see it in my eyes. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of purple right here to the bottom. Almost like we're making a strange kind of Neapolitan ice cream. One that has blue, green, and purple. I don't even know what those flavors would be. But just a little bit down here, following that line of the shore, right over to the edge, and our final mountain right here. Perfect. Just like that. That looks great. Now this right here is going to be kind of tough because we can't really paint this one until that's mostly dry. So that's where that paper towel is going to really come in handy. Kind of go on a little tiny piece right here. And I'm just going to kind of just blot up just a little bit of this on the edge, just so that we can kind of paint that a little faster. If you have time and patience, that is a great time just to use it. Just wait. It always works better that way. But if you're going quick, or maybe you're trying to catch a boat, or you're in the field and you don't really have much time somewhere, real easy, just kind of add a little bit of a blot right there. And then we're gonna kind of come up there and fill in the rest. That's still gonna take a couple seconds to dry, so let's work on our little tiny boat right down here, at least the first piece. A little bit of blue should do, making sure that brush is mostly dry, and just a touch of, say, a little bit of blue or purple, or really any color that's kind of cool. We can just put a little bit of a wake right behind that boat. Doesn't need to be much, but it just takes a little bit to make it look like it's really cruising, which I love. And we'll come back in there and add just a touch of color here in a little bit to kind of fully pull that off. If you look at this, I mean, this is already turning out to be so cool of a landscape. I mean, just the mountains in the background. It only takes a couple of these layers to really kind of pull everything together. So if you're pretty happy with where you're at, you should be, but it's this last little piece that we really need to kind of really pin it all there. Unfortunately, it's also the scariest piece. So we're gonna kind of have a nice dark line, almost like that shadowy forest green right down here. And then up here, it's gonna be kind of dark. And then the middle will be some of those greens. I don't know why it looks that way. It's just nature and mountains. I've looked at a whole lot of them. You just always get that kind of dark layer on top. And you kind of always get the shadows down below. But let's see if we can pull it off here. Just doing a little bit of the test, seeing how dry stuff is. Just doing a little bit of finger painting, you know. Why just keep the fun for the brush? And then things feel relatively dry, so let's dive in. Although if you want to be doubly sure, always go back in with that piece of paper. Toilet paper also works great. You should never be without a little bit of paper towel or TP. All right. I'm sure there's some fancier word for it. Art always has those. Le blot, le towel or something. It's always French. And so what we're gonna do in here is we're going to actually add the middle first, and then we'll add these dark colors on top. So for the middle, let's add, how about a touch of yellow and maybe a little bit of our green. Just something like this, and then maybe a little bit of green. Always fun to work in the middle because there's like no wrong answers, especially when it comes to like scary hard edges and stuff. So we can just add a little bit of those right there. It's looking great. And then let's start to slowly work our way up. I'm thinking some of this nice sort of dark blue, and we might kind of get into some of these other colors later, but let's kind of lean heavily into it. You don't want to go too heavy, but this is going to be basically the darkest piece of the painting, because we also have all these kind of rough edges we kind of need to hide. So here we go. I'm going to add a little bit of this blue right up, just working those edges, trying to stick within the lines, but if you don't, that's okay too. You can kind of cover them up with the paint as well. Right over to the edge, piece by piece. And then of course the most important part is to make sure that it connects to that brush stroke we already made earlier. Looks like mine is actually a little bit dry already, so it's not kind of blending too well, but we can fix that in a moment. Just working my way down, mostly on the top there, because I'm gonna add another color below. So something kind of like that. It's looking pretty good. Could have used a little bit more blending. Maybe I was chatting too much, a little bit too slow in the uptake. But here's just a bit of pure green and just acting as the intermediary right there. Voila. Perfect. And now below, I was kind of digging that purple earlier, so I might stick with a bit more of that. If you want, you can also add a little bit of brown, something kind of warm. This is what that would look like. You know, just like a little swatch, something around here. I usually try to make sure that all of my paintings have a little bit of warmth in them and coolness. And so this one is pretty heavy on those cool colors, so if you can find little spots to kind of hide those warm ones, that works as well. And then let's add some of that purple. It was just so cool to kind of, I like it in that other mountain. So we're just gonna add a little bit of that purple. And here's why we did this one earlier, is because when we come down here and kind of carve out that edge, it really pops. It kind of shows one of those little hills. Now, this is not going to be like the most accurate map of Whittier ever. Do not use these paintings to navigate with, but they do kind of get the feel and shape of the mountains in places like that. And you're going to see in this 4-part panorama, we're actually going to touch on everything from this massive building that a lot of people in Whittier live in to the tunnel, and we're going to get all of that in one giant panorama. Not something you can normally do with your human eyeballs, but that's the beauty of art. You can paint how it feels, you can paint how it goes together in our mind, not just how it looks. A little bit more purple right down here. Oh, that is looking lovely. A couple little dots wherever you need them, but mostly with watercolor, you just kind of leave it alone, let it do its own thing. And now it's time to fill in this little tiny boat, and we can call this painting done, which is really cool. No pressure on this, just a tiny little line. Mostly we just don't want to mess it up. Use a little bit of indigo, a little bit of blue, whatever you got, something kind of darkish though. And you can just add the top of the boat, you can add the bottom of the boat, you can add the mast, you can add whatever you want. I'm just gonna add a touch right there, and then maybe that mast. Something like that. Easy, simple, and then just like that, this giant landscape kind of comes together in this really fun, cool way. Breaking